In this lesson, we're going to look at the mastering process for task 1A, la la la. Now, this is quite complex, and we're just going to look at it very basically, okay? Just enough to kind of take us from the finished product and a little polish, rather than a full-blown mastering process. Now, it's important to note at this point that actually it is not necessary to master your work for the final submission of the coursework. But if you are feeling confident and you want to have a go, please do so. Just be very aware that it can be quite a destructive process. So if you find that you're getting worse results rather than better results, sometimes it's just better not to do it at all, okay? That being said, I thoroughly recommend you do master, because it's going to make the consistency, well, done properly, done well, it's going to make the consistency between speakers a lot more consistent, okay? So it's going to make it, when you change from headphones or when you change from large speakers to small speakers or whatever kind of speakers you're on, the consistency is going to be that much better. The process that we're going to follow is just basically trying to narrow the dynamic range even further across the whole mix and trying to spread out the stereo bandwidth as well, ever so slightly, okay? And we're going to add a little bit of polish using some EQ. Now, it's important to remember that this is going to be applied to the whole track, okay? So it's not like mixing where you're trying to polish an individual track and you're trying to bring up the levels of an individual track. This, what we're just about to do, is going to change the whole track as one. And although that seems quite obvious, it'll be very surprising to find out how many people actually start trying to hone in on a single instrument and think, oh, I can just polish that in the mastering stage. And that's the wrong attitude, okay? Because what you need to be thinking at, if it's not right in the mix, it definitely won't be right in the master. And you're going to have this toing and throwing from your main project to your master project, and you may find yourself bouncing down the same project 5, 6, 7, 100 times, whatever, and that doesn't matter, because you can do that. And sometimes you'll notice problems in the mastering stage that you necessarily didn't notice in the mix stage. So you must, if you notice these things, you must come back to the mix stage and come and readjust them, okay? So what we've got here is our mixing, okay? And I am going to create a new project just for mastering. And what I tend to do is feed task 1A, task 1B and task 1C into the mastering template. The reason for this, mastering can make your mixes consistent across speakers, but it can also make songs going from one song to the next also more consistent. So you might find that when you were mixing your task 1A, it's quieter than your task 1B, or vice versa. It might be louder or quieter, whatever. And this stage allows you to balance the actual songs within themselves as well, so that as the examiner is passing from task 1A to task 1B to task 1C, it's consistent across the board, and he's not having to adjust his volumes. And this on its own can actually gain you a few marks, because if the examiner only has to adjust his volume once, and that's at the beginning, you know, he's going to have a lot more of an enjoyable experience, meaning that he'll be actually able to listen to your mix rather than keep thinking about, oh, I've got to quickly adjust that, it's because it's got too loud or whatever, okay? So I'm going to do some bounce downs, but first, before I get on with that, I just want you to see the actual original track. Now, this is the original track. Now, you can kind of clearly see that there is a 0 dB line right here, okay? And you can see this, that it's really flat, okay? And it's almost like somebody's taken some scissors or a line rule and just cut all the way through it to make it absolutely flat. And you notice that the dynamic range on the loud section doesn't go above this point at all, ever, okay? And we can whiz our way all the way through, and this line always remains consistent. And because it's a stereo line, of course, you've got the same at the bottom, and it's probably a bit more obvious to see at the bottom that this is a 0 dB line, because the two tracks, left and right speaker, almost match, but they don't quite. There's a gap all the way through, and the same as at the bottom, okay? So that's the first thing I want you to see, is that when you're looking at commercial records, they never, ever, ever, ever go past the 0 dB line, but they do try and get their mixes as close to that 0 dB line in the quieter sections as possible as well. So as well as the loud sections always having to reach that point and not go past it, the quieter sections are also brought up to it, okay? And this is a process called limiting. Now, I want to make you very aware of this, because it's quite a hard process, a hard dynamic process, okay? And you need to be aware of that is what we're trying to achieve. And that's what's going to create your consistency past all speakers. Because what you'll find probably in your mix is that if you looked at your output gain now, you might see that you've got +2 or something. Now that's going to cause a ducking effect. So when you're thinking about mastering, you do need to kind of keep that in mind, that anything past 0 dB will be reduced in volume, okay? So trying to get a couple of decibels in headroom is going to be really important. Now let me just play my track and see if we've got enough headroom. I've got -11 here, so we should have loads, but we'll go to one of the more heavier sections, which is this one here, and we'll press play, and this is just my track, and we'll monitor this level to see how high it goes, okay? Okay, so you can see that the highest mine got was -0.5, so we are half a decibel below that threshold, which is enough headroom. That's plenty of headroom, because I'm going to put all that back. But so that I don't get this ducking or pulsing effect, it's really quite a good idea to keep everything below that during the mixing stage. And as we were going through the mixing, I was always saying to you, okay, bring the volumes down rather than take them up. And this is kind of the reason behind that, okay? So what you're going to want to do first is check your whole mix. So play your whole mix and just monitor this level, okay? If it does go above, you might just want to bring your output level down, okay? And you can bring it down by the amount that you've gone above. So we've got 0.5, so if that was +0.5, I would bring it down to -0.5, and that would offset what it's gone above, okay? And that's something you can do at this point. I would not recommend bringing this fader down during the mixing process, but now we're in slightly different territories, okay? And we can, to save us going through the whole mix and bringing things down relatively, this can just save us a bit of time. Just bring it down. Now the other thing is, some people say to me, oh, why don't you set your mastering channel up here? And that's for two reasons. One is what I said to you before, because I like to feed all of my tracks through the same mastering template to give it that kind of consistency. But the second thing is, actually, this isn't the end part of the process. This is the end part of the process. So what we're trying to do is make this area here the last part of the process, which is the limiting, okay? Because at the moment, if we did that and knocked down this volume, our 0 dB line would actually now be, if we knock that down, our 0 dB line would now be -0.6, okay? So that's the two reasons why I don't do it in the mixing template. We do it in the mastering template, okay? That being said, now this is the process. So you're going to need a maximum of 1 second of silence at the beginning of your track, and you're going to need a maximum of 1 second of silence at the end of your track, okay? So if we look at here, you can see that I've just gone under and I've just gone over here. So if I zoom in, and it's really important that what the requirements do say, that you do have to have this 1 second or just under 1 second of silence, no more than 1 second. And you'll see that where the track starts, if I press play here, it would be a hard start, yeah? So it'd go straight into it. But if I pull it back, so where's my time? It's here, look. So I've got 15.1, okay? So if I bring it back here, it should be 14.1 or more, okay? 14.3, which means I'm well in that 1 second. If I press play from here, you'll notice I've got that nice little lead in. Now, if I whiz to the other end, and it's the same thing here. Now, the reason I've left a bit more at the end, and you're probably thinking to yourself, oh, well, it finished at bar 97. We've still got to do the fade out. We're going to do that in the mastering section. But I've also left a little bit more because of the reverb tail. Now, if I press play here, and then the reverb tail just finished just past bar 98. I'm going to zoom in because we're going to be messing around with that for ages otherwise. Okay, so that's really important. Before you mix down, making sure you've got that second of silence at the beginning and second of silence at the end, okay? We could probably reduce that ever so slightly, but that's the kind of area that we're looking for, okay? So once we've got our mix below this 0 dB, and once we've got our second either way with this red bar, with this yellow bar here, we can then press on the output this little bounce button, BNCE. If you're in Cubase, it's probably in your file menu. Excuse me. Now, we press bounce. Now, inclinations are, you're going to say, okay, well, we want it uncompressed, which we do. PCM is our uncompressed format. I'm going to do it as AIF. If you're on a PC, you're probably going to want to do it as wave. Now, we're not going to reduce the resolution of this project. We're going to leave it at 24-bit. Now, when you put it onto your CDs, it needs to be 16-bit 44.1. But we've still got a bit of processing to do, so we're not going to do our final kind of compression until after that. So we're going to leave it at the project setup, which is 44.1, which you've got here, and 24-bit. If you want to know what the bit rate is, you need to go over to the Logic Pro settings and preferences. Now I need to cancel this first, sorry. Logic Pro settings, preferences, audio. Pull this over and you've got this button ticked here which just says 24-bit recording. If that wasn't clicked, it would be 16-bit. Now I would always say try and record as high a bit rate and depth samples as possible, okay? The higher the better. So let's go back to our bounce settings. So we're going to leave it at this. This is our project setup. It's no reduction. It won't work on a CD because it should be 16-bit 44.1 for a CD, so it won't work 100% on a CD, but that's okay because we're going to do that after we master. Once you've done that, you're going to press bounce. So within my La 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 lessons, I can come down here and I can go task 1A, that's where my main project is, and then I can go mastering, and then I've got this master template here. Now inside the mastering, I've got all my bounce downs. Now if I just extend this a little bit further, you'll see my labeling convention from the mixing stage is this. It says task 1A La 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 bounce down unmastered 1.1. Now that tells me that that is the first bounce down that isn't mastered, and you need to get a good labeling convention like that, okay? And once it's been mastered, I then change it to this. Task 1A master 1.1. That tells me that's the first master, okay? And then I've got this 1.2 and so on. Because you're going to be coming backwards and forwards, it's really important to make sure you get this labeling convention just right, because you might do this several times. Once you press the bounce button, I won't do that because I've already done it, we're then going to go over to our mastering template. So here we are. Now, all I did for this is I went to File, New Project, don't close because we're not closing this one, went to New Project, I selected Audio, and I made sure that I had Input 1 and 2 selected, okay? Press cancel on that, we're going to get rid of that. Don't close. Now, what am I doing? Okay, so once I've got this up, I get an empty template. Come over to my file, and all I did is grab my unmastered 1.1 and dropped it on. Okay, once again, I won't do that because I've already done it. Once you've dropped it on, you'll see that I've also set up my bounce region again, not just for yet. I've also set up my task A, task B and task C, because eventually I will bring all of my project files into here to be mastered. Now we don't set up any mastering on our tracks, okay? The reason it's a template is because all the mastering is going through the master output, okay? This is the chain that I'm using, so I'm doing a little bit of EQ, and it's a tiny bit of EQ. I'm making the lower region just ever so slightly more boomy, and I'm making the higher region or the trebles ever so slightly more airy, and this is kind of adding just a little bit of polish. You can't really hear it because it's right out of range, but actually it is adding some nice kind of depth to your mix, okay? So that's the first thing I did, and I've just brought that up on this one here by 2.5 and 2, so I could adjust that again if I want to, just bring it up to 2.5. So we've got an even amount laid out there. Once you've done that, I then added the spreader. You're going to want to have to play around with these things and just kind of, I've reduced the intensity of both the lower and the higher, and you might want to just reduce the width as well depending on your mix. You are going to have to trial and error these effects. The final one that I've put on is this limiter. Now the limiter is where all the magic happens. And if you do nothing else, these are the three things. You can add multi-band compressors and things like that, but for this task, because you don't really need to master, if you don't want to, I keep it very simple. So we're just adding those enhancements to make it consistent rather than a full-on blown master. Now, with the limiter, I've left the output at 0 dB. This is basically the point at which it's going to stop going over. And you can set the release to kind of see how hard it crops the volume before it gets to this point, and then you push the gain to push all of the lower volumes up, okay? So here you see I've got plus 2 decibels, so I'm pushing all my volumes up by 2 decibels, okay? So this is my mix, and you'll notice when I was saying to you earlier about the La 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 actual track, you'll notice that it went across the board and it was flat at 0 dB, and there was a little gap here that you could see that it was on 0 dB. But you can tell by mine that I'm well off of that point, okay? So this is where we're going to bring it all back and try and get our mixes to that stage, okay? So the first thing I need to do is just check that everything is working. So I'm just going to turn everything off, and you're going to need to listen through your track several hundred times to make sure you've got no ducking, to make sure that it's not making your mix worse than it was when you were actually mixing, okay? So what I'm going to do is come in here with no processing. This is what my mix is sounding like with no processing, okay? So then we're going to test the EQ. So just by turning it on, and you should hear very little difference, okay? And you're probably going to want to listen to the whole track before you add any more processing, okay? Next thing, we're going to add the spreader. I would turn the EQ off because we're happy with that, and turn the spreader on. And let's see what the spreader does just by turning it on and off, okay? We'll turn it off, and you can hear straight away it's kind of enhanced that frequency, enhanced the width of the stereo field. Turn it back on. If you're happy with that, then you leave it on and then you turn the EQ on and make sure we've got that. And you're going to have to keep making these subtle adjustments, okay, until you get it absolutely right. So let's just push it through here. Let's turn this off for a minute. And we can turn them off, see what it sounded like before. And you'll see I've gone above the threshold now. Okay, so very, very subtle. There's very little difference there. The big difference is going to come now when I turn the limiter on. And we're looking, let's reset that. And we're looking at this 0 dB line. So let's go to my high point, and you can see the highest peak is there. There it is. Now, depending on how hard you want this limiter to work, you can turn this up. This is, the harder you push the gain, the more artificial interference you're going to receive from your mix, okay? So you do want to experiment with that and make sure you get that right. The final part of the process is the fade out, okay? We don't really need a fade in for this because it's a hard start. And same as the automation in your mixing stage, just press the A button, turn the automation on, and all we're going to do is just patch in a simple fade. Now you're going to want to zoom into this point. We'll probably do it about there. Okay, let's just zoom out again, get that other end and pull that down, and then we should have our nice little fade. And that's a bit too harsh, so let's just move that along. And we can make that a lot longer because I'm not happy with that at all. And there we are. So there's the fade that we needed. There's our 1 second. So we can bring this end back to make sure that we've still got our 1 second. And you can see where our track finishes. It finishes here. Let's just turn that to custom. Sorry. Where's the custom one? There it is. So we can see that it finishes at 1 minute to 50, so it's 50.6. So we should be 51, 52. So I've got a bit too much there. So I'll probably bring it off just a little bit more so it gets to 51.6 or just before. There we go. So we'll crop it there, and let's just make sure that's inside of our fade. So we could even bring it back a bit further to be really well in. Okay. Brilliant. Let's zoom back in. Now, so that's the mix. Now, what you're probably interested in seeing is what this actually looks like. So we've got our original, and what I've done is I've hidden a couple of tracks here. So let me just try and get this exactly so that the whole track's in view. So I've hidden a couple of tracks here, and I'll show you them. But this is my original. You can see it's miles off. And I've done two things. I've done it with the +2. I've done it with this +2 decibels, but I've also done it with +6 decibels. So unhide my tracks. So here's my +2 decibels, and you can see I'm much closer to the line. And if I wanted to be conservative, this is where I'd leave it. And I'm probably, if I was going to submit this to Edexcel, this is where I would leave it. I'd probably leave it at that, and that would be enough. However, as you can see from the +6, it's a lot closer to our original track, isn't it? So you can see that those peaks are getting a lot closer. And if I pushed it to +8, you'd have that complete and utter flat line. And that's really up to you, but you must make sure when you are doing the mastering that you don't wreck what you've done in the mixing stage, okay? That's pretty much all I've got to say about that. Apart from, we should probably listen to the track. So let me hide these tracks again, and we should probably listen to it with +2, and then we'll listen to it with +6 and see what you think. And we'll listen to it in this kind of region, okay? So without. Okay, now it's +6. Important, even though we push that gain, we're still staying below our 0 dB, so you're getting the point of that now. Okay, that's pretty much all I have to say about that. Once again, once you finish that, and once you're happy, once you've done your several hundred bounce downs, you then have to bounce it down again. So make sure you set up your second of in, which is already done for us, and then we've just adjusted that to make sure we've got a second of output. We press the bounce button again. Make sure it's uncompressed, ready for CD. But this time, we're going to have it on AIFF. Wave is also acceptable. Change this to 16-bit, this to 44.1, and away you go. Press the bounce button, and you have got your track ready to put onto CD. Well done. I hope you found this course useful. Patch in next year when you get some more, and we'll also try and do some other courses in the meantime. But good luck. See you next time.